All right, if people can come in and sit down, we're delighted to have everybody here. Come on in. We're about to talk about the revolution in AI data centers and how new energy will change global finance in the world. Come on in and sit down. I'm Steve Westley. I run the Westley Group, which is one of the largest venture firms focused on industrial efficiency. We have 33 of the world's largest industrial companies, from Volkswagen to Duke Energy to Hitachi, as investors. I'm joined by my longtime friend Daniel Weiss, who's one of the leading investors also in sustainable energy, industrial efficiency, the future of all things mobility and energy related. The punchline is, there's a revolution going on in artificial intelligence and data centers, combined with electrification of transportation globally, that is creating the biggest investment opportunities in human history. We're going to talk about where those opportunities are to be found. But don't take my word for it. One of our LPs, Vistra, the Texas-based independent power producer, had the third fastest growing stock in the world last year, one notch ahead of NVIDIA. And the punchline for all of you is, there is no artificial intelligence without the energy to power it. I just want to show you this. I'm the rare person who grew up in Silicon Valley, and my whole life, going back to the 70s, people would say, oh, that Silicon Valley thing, I think it's all over now. It's in the past, or it's going to Austin or Boston or Lord knows where else. Folks, I'm here to tell you, I've had a front row seat in every one of these revolutions in technology, and I will tell you flat out, without any doubt or equivocation, the technology boom is going faster than ever before. Again, don't take my word for it. The two fastest growing companies in human history are Anthropic and OpenAI, but they use more energy than any manufacturing firm ever dreamed of. By the way, I see a few of you taking pictures. Take all the pictures you want. If you give me your card, I'll send you the whole deck and you can have it and take credit for it. Every few years, people say, oh my gosh, energy demand, it's going up 4%, 5%. I just want you to know, and folks, you heard it here, the experts are wrong. Energy demand is going up faster than ever before, dramatically so, and it's because the usage of the large hyperscalers is going up at rates never seen before. By the way, if you're in the venture firm, which Daniel and I are, the big standard is when someone comes to meet you, we're always wondering one thing. How long does it take you to get to 100 million users? Television, which was the big deal when I was a kid, 38.5 years. Internet, 7 years to get to 100 million. iPhone, 4 years. ChatGPT, 2 months. But someone has to power it. I just want to show you a picture. This is a small county in Arizona, and they put the first data center there, 2017, $2 billion building, massive. The people in Arizona were up in arms in this small county. Can we handle it? You know, water use, power use, how are we going to deal with it? Arizona Public Service is one of our investors. So that's what it looked like in 2017. Last year, in that one county, 13 data centers. It is swamping the local economy, the power demand. No one has seen anything like this scale of growth ever. Now, it's not just data centers and AI, it's electric vehicles. Now you'd think, forgive me here, but with the current president and a lot of the headlines like, oh my God, is anybody even buying an electric car anymore? Folks, of all cars sold on the planet, including Africa and Central America, 1 out of 4 was electric. This year, it's going to be close to 1 out of 3, and that number is going up, not because it's green or I say so, but because a firm called BYD is now making a slick $18,000 electric vehicle that no Western legacy automaker can keep up with. That's the world we live in. So it's this data center revolution overlaid with a dramatic change of the vehicles that is creating this unheralded demand for energy. Now, it gets even more complex than that. We're in the middle of the automation of transportation. If you live where I do, you see Waymos go by all of the time, but the growth of Waymo and autonomous vehicles is happening faster than anything you may have thought. You may have just read that Waymo just moved quickly from being in 6 cities to 10 cities, but the reality is actually different because, and you may have missed this, Waymo is the first company in the world to get full regulatory approval for freeway driving. So they're not just in San Francisco, they're in 25 cities in the Bay Area, another 20 in LA. So when you hear Waymo in 10 or 20 cities in the future, that's really 200 or 300, and they're going into London, Tokyo, and New York City as we are here today. So these overlapping revolutions are changing everything. Now, the old world is mantra, what we need is the all of the above solution, coal, natural gas, and nuclear. Okay. If you want to know what power is going on this year, what is being built this year, let's take a look and see if it looks like coal, natural gas, and nuclear. %51 of everything being built this year is solar, batteries second, wind third, natural gas going online is 7, no coal, barely any nuclear, been precisely 2 nuclear plants credentialed in the last 40 years. That'll tick up, but it's coming slowly. Folks, there are no Marxist utility executives that I have run into. This is what they are building globally. This is the future. I'm going to stop here. We're going to turn it to some questions. What I want you to think about, and the reason we did these particular pictures, in my life, Amazon is this huge thing, and they had about 140 billion in revenues, with the books and all the things they sold. But 10 billion was this thing called Amazon Web Services. And when Jeff Bezos stepped down and they had to choose who's going to run the whole thing, it wasn't the guy with all the delivery trucks. They chose the guy running Amazon Web Services. And from Andy Jassy to all of you, every application we know today is going to be reinvented with AI inside of it. That is the new world. So with that, Daniel, you've been investing in energy, transport, mobility, the future for 30 years, 25 years. Tell people, where do you think they can make money? There's a lot of change coming. What is your firm looking for at the Angeleno Group?
Thanks, Steve. First of all, we should just say, ladies and gentlemen, just imagine, a little secret, if Steve has this much energy as a public speaker on the heels of getting off of airplanes to Korea and Japan, either they're serving something very special in the cappuccino here at the Montgomery Summit, or we want to get his other secrets. But thank you for the kind introduction and for the question. Angeleno Group, well, couldn't agree with you more, by the way. It was a terrific presentation about load growth. You have your fingers and clearly articulated fingers on the pulse of something that's incredibly transformative in the clean energy and climate technology landscape, which is load growth. So the question is, where can we make money investing in that space? So another version of some of the numbers that Steve shared with y'all, we're going to, in terms of CAGR, we are going to consume, in terms of growth rates, 10x the number of electrons over the next 15 years that we did over the last 25 years. So how are those electrons going to be generated? How are those electrons going to be transported? How are they going to be consumed? And in answering those questions lies in part the answer to yours, which is, where can investors make money? So first, the grid. As you know, you're a Californian by birth like me. Much of the transmission and distribution infrastructure, not only in California, but the US more broadly, is 60 or 70 years old. So the electrons that are delivered to our office here, 15 minutes from where we're sitting, were built on or about the time of the Korean War. A few things have changed in the world, in our economy, in technology since then. So we have a fundamentally aging and inadequate transmission and distribution grid, the highway that delivers those electrons to data centers, to vehicles, to new generations of industrial manufacturing. So what are we going to do about this creaky, aging, inadequate grid? There's an enormous opportunity to engage in investments and innovation around what's called GET, grid enhancing technologies. So how can we do more with the infrastructure that we have? We'll get to building more infrastructure, but how can we do more with the infrastructure that we have? And that can be, we can get into some examples if you'd like of specific technologies, but imagine transmission lines that are 40, 50% more efficient. Imagine technologies that reduce what's called line loss when you're transmitting an electron over the infrastructure by 50, 60, 70%. Imagine a world in which, and for many in this room, frankly, this was very personal in the last year or so with wildfires. 19% of all wildfires are associated in some way, directly or indirectly, with grid infrastructure. Imagine a world in which we could reduce that by 50, 75%. So, one small example to make it concrete, we recently invested in a company called IND Technologies. I think you and I briefly had an exchange about it. IND Technologies is a company that uses RF signature monitoring. So they look at radio frequency signatures on transmission lines, and it turns out through pattern recognition, you can engage in predictive analytics with a high level of fidelity and understand weeks and in some cases months if there's going to be electrical arcing on a transmission line. And so this technology, which is now being adopted by California-based investor-owned utilities, is giving a sort of a twofer in terms of grid-enhancing technologies. It's engaging in wildfire prevention, which is a form of addressing extreme weather, climate resilience. But, and this is very important, we may get to this, Steve, because we were talking a little bit ahead of time and have over the years, what's changed in our 2 decades. There's an economic value proposition independent of the climate or sustainability dimension of the technology, and that is in the O&M of the fleets that are maintaining the transmission line. So it turns out that a lot of the customers are buying this technology not just because of wildfire prevention, but it can reduce their costs of running trucks to maintain the lines more efficiently, 30, 40, 50%.
Yeah. So just and we're going to do another quick couple questions, but then we're going to throw it open, maybe a question or two from the audience. So get ready to raise your hand and stand up if you have one. If you can challenge the people here, I'm not sure everybody can sort of picture the types of things that are coming in terms of IPOs. A lot of people are thinking, oh my God, the sustainable energy stuff, you guys must be in the windmill or solar panel business. It's really quite different, this clean tech 3.0 compared to 1.0. Can you say a word or two about maybe some of your IPOs or some of the big companies that people should be looking for?
Yeah, so one of the companies, again, you had asked what are areas to invest in. Front page Wall Street Journal, you read about disruptive technology and things like nuclear fusion, for example. And there are very promising and compelling dimensions of next generation technologies. But in terms of companies that are going to be making money or are making money today, where you may see IPOs not in the next 5 to 10 years, but in the next 2, 3, 4 years, depending on capital markets, it's going to be a lot of technologies that you haven't heard of that are creating massive efficiency gains in existing areas of energy. So for example, clean energy. Clean energy, not sure how many folks in this room are following the energy sector generally, but it turns out, contrary to popular wisdom, that clean energy is the biggest and fastest growing area of the global energy economy. It may be a little bit, represents some cognitive dissonance in the drill baby drill era, but in 2025, according to Bloomberg, the world spent $2.3 trillion in clean energy. That's more than 2x was spent in hydrocarbons or fossil fuels last year. And so companies and technologies that are contributing to that vertical of the energy economy, making it faster, more efficient, cheaper, are going to be areas where we see promising growth and investment opportunities, and whether they'll be IPOs or trade sales, fast-growing companies. One company, just for an illustrative example, again, to make it real. We backed a Stanford-trained entrepreneur who built one of the largest IPPs, independent power producers, in solar in California, with a company called Borrego Renewables. And he found out through experience, as many good entrepreneurs do, what his bottleneck was in building solar, utility scale, or C&I scale solar installations. And part of it was getting access to the supply chain in a more efficient way, how to buy the modules, the inverters, all the components that go into making a solar installation. And he built a software platform called Anza Renewables to address that problem. That company has been experiencing high double and triple digit annualized growth rates, feeding into this mega trend around the $2.3 trillion. And it's companies like that that are living in the spaces that are enabling technologies for this massive secular shift around decarbonization of the energy economy.
No, that's perfect. Let me change gears just a little bit. By the way, one of the issues that came up, we put a slide up on nuclear. Some of you are probably thinking, what about nuclear? Make no mistake, nuclear is without a doubt the long-term solution to our energy needs. The rub is I hope I gave you a sense, the increased demand slope is coming so quickly. Nuclear, it takes pretty much 5 years to get something permitted, another 10 years to build. It will eventually be the solution, whether it's some combination of SMRs, Gen 4 fission or fusion, that'll be sorted out. But in venture, people say, do you like nuclear? Do you like carbon sequestration? Do you like green hydrogen? The answer is yeah, I like all those things. The question you should be asking is when? When do we like them? When are they cost effective? So I want to come back to you a bit on this. We've got this huge demand curve coming. Utility executives literally are running around with their hair on fire around the world trying to figure out how they can build most quickly. Where do you see things being built? And if you can, say a word about what a virtual power plant is and where you see those fitting in.
Yeah, so part of the dynamic I think you're referring to, Steve, is what's referred to in the space as BTM, or behind the meter. So what are opportunities to unlock power generation, miniature or even not so miniature power plants through microgrids or other installation of power facilities? If, as Goldman Sachs and others predict in 2026, between R&D and CapEx, hyperscalers spend this year $1 trillion in CapEx, a lot of that's going to go into building data centers and facilities that power those facilities. Is there a way in off-peak hours or in other contexts to harness that power to support the grid? We're seeing a cottage industry developing an ecosystem utilizing AI and software to help enable that. So to give you some perspective on this, the hyperscalers are going to spend more money on CapEx in 2026 than all the investor-owned utilities in the United States are projected to spend in the next 5 years. The data center, AI, hyperscalers are becoming the vanguard, the tip of the spear in the 21st century energy revolution. Who would have thunk it 10 years ago? You had asked, some of the things that have changed in the arc of the time that we've been co-investing together and been friends and fellow travelers investing in this space, Steve, over the last 20 years. And there are quite a number of things. Policy, which have swung in different directions, public attitudes, corporate behavior, but perhaps none is more important and is a bigger driver of the adoption of these new technologies today than markets and economics. It is simply, when we founded Angeleno Group in 2001, this September will be our 25th anniversary, this was the adoption of solar was driven largely by politics and policy. Yeah. Today, solar over the last 10 plus years, down 90+% per kilowatt hour. Energy storage, down in cost, more than 90+% per kilowatt hour. Energy efficient lighting, lumens per watt, reduced cost, more than 90% in the last 10 plus years. So the technologies, wind down more than 70% over a similar period in cost. So the economics of clean energy and renewables are fundamentally different than when we started our firms.
Let me just throw out an interesting fact or two for you. I used to work in the Department of Energy a few decades ago. The cost per watt of installing solar, $78 a watt. Today, I don't know if anybody knows, 20 cents heading to 10. This is where the utility executives are moving now. Point two, what's really interesting, we just told you, it's alarming, a tidal wave's coming, utilities are going to need more power than ever before. But a lot of the utilities in the country are only operating at this moment at about 50% capacity. So they don't need a massive amount of power all the time. They just need to be able to satisfy and make sure you don't have brownouts during the time of day. So the issue isn't just building more and more plants. That costs a lot of dough, especially if you're only at 50% utilization. You need power at certain times of day. And all the action is not so much at producing more electrons, which you can do with solar batteries and other technologies, geothermal. It's getting the electrons where you want them based on the time of day. So Daniel, I want to pivot over. We're getting to a point where a lot of the cars in the world, 50% of the ones in China, about 14% in Europe, US is coming up on 10, but that number is going up as the costs come down. You're going to see fleets of vehicles, and there's two big issues that come up. One is, how can you harness assets of, aggregate big pots of batteries together so you only have to buy them, or better yet, rent them when you need? And then there's this niggling question of, who exactly is going to own cars in the future when you have ubiquitous, low-cost, autonomous vehicles that during hours of peak demand, you can simply plug in? But say a little bit about this virtual power plant thing and
autonomous,
and also the convergence of the energy industry and the auto industry. By the way, Tesla's fastest growing division is their battery division today. The auto section is shrinking.
Yeah, I think sometimes when I listen to you in public context or private context, I just want to give you a shout out on this and call people's attention to it. There has been a lot of negative media coverage, of the EV industry. We didn't meet forecasts from, a year ago. A number of large OEMs are pulling some of their electric vehicle models. Steve has been consistent, and as many of you or some of you in this room may know, was one of the earliest investors in the EV space with Tesla. consistent. You've been consistent in saying that the death of EVs is over-exaggerated, and in fact, it's going to go in a very different direction over the long term. We totally agree with you on that. I mean, I have a recently minted college graduate son who's now living in Los Angeles, and when he comes to pick me up to go out to dinner, we hop in his Waymo together. And so there is, if you look, we're in the middle, relatively early innings of a massive secular shift in terms of where we get our BTUs in the world, how we provide energy for the planet. Now, to be clear, still today, even with these dynamics that Steve and I have been talking about, more than 80% of all the primary energy in the world comes from hydrocarbons today. But with phenomena like EVs and autonomous, which again, as this room knows, is primarily driven by electric drivetrains, the number is going to go by 2050 to the majority of the energy in the planet, if we get to net zero, is going to come from power, from electrons. And so there's this massive sea change electrifying the global economy. EVs and autonomous are a big part of it. Power generation for clean energy and data centers are part of it. Electrifying industrial manufacturing is part of it. And so a lot of folks ask this question, are we overbuilding? Are we in a bubble? Are there going to be stranded assets if we start building all this power generation to meet this demand? And perhaps some of us in the industry might suggest or submit to you all that we've got way more demand over the next 20 or 30 years from AVs, from EVs. And by the way, interesting fact, you probably know this, but for those in the audience, most folks think of the electricity that goes into an electric car. The most important part of that electricity is to power the battery. But guess what? In Waymos and autonomous vehicles, the majority of the electricity, could be a little more than 50%, to power that car is the electricity going into the data center that's helping the Waymo navigate. And so there's a whole other field of power generation around AVs and EVs that's not just the vehicle itself. Love it.
Hey, I think we have time maybe for one more super quick question. You had your arm up first. Go ahead, just stand up and belt it out.
I love your slides at the beginning. Look what you said. The new generation that was being produced this last year, 80+% is solar, wind, battery. You talk about it's slow, but the small nuclear power plants are coming. Then you go over and look at your other side, EVs is going to go to 30% fairly quickly. Autonomous vehicles are going to become a huge fraction. The core technology for every single one of those is owned by China. The #1 dominant country in the world for all of the technology dominating every single bit of the leading edge of what's going on is owned by China. What's that mean for investors?
Yeah. I've got one quick answer. Look, make no mistake. China owns solar power production, they own battery production, they own EV production. That is a bummer for the United States geopolitically. We need to fix that. We own AI, but we have to figure out how to power it more effectively. And the answer is getting our EV industry in shape, putting more solar and wind in the ground, fixing our grid, and then getting serious about this next generation of technologies. But they have to be cost effective. I will tell you as a veteran of this, 25 years ago, Clean Tech 1.0 was way out of the money. Now I give you a handful of technologies that are way in the money. You're about to see a renaissance of IPOs in this sector. Daniel, you've got the last word, 30 seconds.
I agree with that assessment. It's a great point. The optimist in me says that areas of technology leadership like AI which are going to be central to the transformation of the $6 trillion vertical of the global economy known as energy. We are in the lead here today. And just by the way, it's not a well-known fact, but the technology that powered the solar revolution in China around module manufacturing was invented in the United States. And we can do that in the next generation of energy technology in the 21st century.
I want to leave you with this. California is developing the technologies that are changing the world, whether it's AI or renewables. We just need to stay at the forefront. Thank you for coming out today. I hope we inspired you with some new ideas. Daniel, thank you. Excellent as always.